What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel as well as another video. So this video is going to make episode 6 in our FXRT clone build, and it's going to be the continuation of what we started in the last episode. That would be the mock-up process. So if you remember in the last episode, we went through, we added these bars, relocated the speedometer up higher by way of these risers here. This is going to give us a nice little baseline for how everything needs to sit and allow us to start moving forward with adding this fairing as well as these lowers here. We also have these saddlebags that we're going to have to go through and mock those up to get those ready to go out for paint. Got a little bit of welding that's going to have to be done to those. We had to switch a tab around in order to get those to fit correctly for this bike. But first things first, we're going to have to get this bracket right here mounted to the front of this frame here in order to accept that fairing right there. So without further ado, let me get set up and we'll get going on this thing. In order to mount this bracket to the bike, what we're going to have to do is split this thing apart. It's bolted together. This piece is going to go right through, hang off the front of the frame right here. Once we snug everything up, we will then be able to go ahead and mount the fairing to the front by way of these 4 bolts right here. So let's get to it. And the bracket is installed. This bracket is sandwiched to the frame by way of those bolts. It is secured to the motorcycle and 100% in line with the frame, so we should be good to go there. The next step is actually going to be to mount the fairing to the bike. The fairing basically sits down over the top of this bracket, just like that. We are going to secure it together by sandwiching it with 4 bolts between this headlight mounting bracket here and the actual bracket that's on the bike. So once we do that, we should be able to go through, do any kind of fine tuning that we're going to need to do, make sure that this is sitting exactly where we want it, so that we can then move forward with the next step. So let's get to it. All right, got it loosely secured into position here. I did leave these bolts a little loose. We're going to have to maneuver this thing around, but biggest reason why I left it loose is we have to install this bracket here. This bracket here is going to utilize the tab right here. It is going to mount right here on the frame. Once we secure that there, these little guys that are on the end here will mount up underneath here, and that will stiffen everything up. I don't want to go ahead and mount that in there until I figure out exactly where this thing all has to be. So we pretty much get one shot at doing this and doing it right without having to do all kinds of extra body work to fix things. On first glance, I mean, my OCD kicks in and I can't leave stuff like this alone, but before I go to paint, I am going to, wherever this ends up being, once I sandwich it in, I'm going to go ahead and scribe a line here, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this extra material that's going on around the corners here, because for one, it kind of hinders you, access or whatever, and then 2, it just looks like crap. One of the other things I'm seeing too as well is where this fiberglass sits on this bracket right here, we are literally right against this piece right here. So I'm probably going to go ahead and before it hits paint, I'll figure out where I need to be. I'll scribe a little line right there, and then I'm just going to kind of fake it and just kind of go through and grind that out and smooth it out a little bit before it actually sees color, so that that doesn't do that when it sits on the bike. I'd rather see it mount away from that and have a little bit of a gap there. So But all in all, I'd say it looks pretty cool. And yeah, let's start mounting that lower bracket on there. Let's do it. Okay, now that that bracket is in place, we'll see how that sits. Kind of sits against the fiberglass on each side here. I'm going to wait to drill these holes, obviously, because, again, we have this thing just kind of sitting in place. Biggest reason why I'm also going to wait to drill these holes is I'll show you. These lowers, if you look at them at first glance, they look like they are exactly the same. However, one little quick side glance here will show you that this one sits up a lot higher than that one does. This one being for the right hand side will fit right up to the bottom of the fairing. And when we put that in place, we line it up to where it's got to go, it lines up almost perfectly with where that bracket is going to be put. That's with that all in line right there. So that side's cool, but if you take the left side and do the exact same thing with it, and you line it into position and get it there, you can see we're way far off right here. So there is going to have to be a little bit of messing around with that. So in order to get everything where it has to be and make sure that these will come into contact with where I'm going to make these brackets, we can't go ahead and secure this 100%. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those two side fairings and just kind of mock mount them in here, maybe with a pair of like vice grips and a couple of paint paddles to use as a cushion in order to get those to sit where we're at, and then we'll kind of analyze and see exactly how we have to move them, whether they have to go forward or back or in or out, and that will give me a good starting point to fabricate the brackets that I'm going to need to join the bottom of that fairing to the bike itself. So, all right, let me go ahead and do that, and I'll get back to you. All right, so we are temporarily affixed via a couple of pairs of vice grips here, just to give you an idea of what we got going on. Right hand side, good gaps. Fitment is decent. I like the way that looks. And like I said before, fits really good down at the bottom here. I'll be able to fabricate a bracket up, no problem. I should be able to, might actually have to pull out on it a little bit to get it to sit exactly where I want it. But this side, not going to be a big deal. Like I said before, we get over to this side, however, and, you know, gaps are decent, not bad. Gonna have to shave a little there, but that's not a huge deal. But if you look down here, you know, we got a big problem down here. So I got to find a way to get that to sit in a little further. Can't really yank on it too much, but we should be able to get it to come in a little bit. But I'm definitely going to have to get creative. But just to kind of drive the point home here, you know, if you look at this side and you look at the distance between here and here, and then you look at this side and look at the distance between there and there, much smaller on this side. So these are two different pieces. They are 100% two different pieces. Why they manufacture those that way, I have no clue. But it's going to cause a little issue here. So we got to get that rectified. All right, so I'm going to start fabbing up some brackets for this, and I will get back to you as soon as I get them done. So after plenty of trial and error, I came up with some bracketry. I used some steel that I had kind of kicking around, some stock here. I did a lot of bending and twisting and hammering, and came up with these right here. I went through and bent them all into position, got them all to how they're going to work here. We're mounted off the top. I folded it over on the edge so that it can't ride back or forth. Drilled directly through and made it use that front bolt mount right there. And I went in and drilled this out and tapped it so that I was able to just kind of screw a bolt right up through there. So this side went really good. Had to pull out on it a touch like I thought I would. The other side, the bracket is not exactly the exact same type of bracket. I kind of had to get a little creative here. Came off of it again with that fold over, came down, and then did a slight twist to it and made it meet there. But if you are looking at this from the front, even though they are two different brackets, these things are quite symmetrical now. They sit exactly where they need to sit, and they look pretty good. So I think we're going to go with that. The next thing they're going to have to do is go in and get ready to start drilling these. We're going to drill a hole through here. I'm going to start off with like an 1/8 inch bit, drill a couple of holes. 2 of them I think will be sufficient to hold it into place. And I'm going to try to position them way up in there so that once this is all painted, you don't see any of that stuff. But yeah, I got to go through there and get those done. And I'm going to probably, while everything's in place here, I'm going to drill my pilots for these 4 bolts right here for that mount. So it seems like everything is still sitting exactly where it needs to be. So let's get set up and get these things drilled. And just like that, we have everything drilled. We're good to go. Went through here, hit them all with the pilot. So I did an 1/8 inch drill bit right through there and got all of my spots. So I'm going to have 2 there. We have 2 on the other side right there. And then we also have these 4 for the bracket. So 1/8 inch first, just to make sure that we had a decent hole and it was right where we wanted it to be. And then followed up with, I believe that was a 1/4 inch drill bit. Went through and did that. So those are good and pretty much ready to come back off the bike now and start for body work. I got to do a little bit of tracing here, right here, to figure out exactly what I'm going to need to shave off as far as getting this to look a little bit more factory, if you will. Yeah, that stuff's all pretty much ready to come off and go to body work. I'm going to have to get a little creative here and remove some of my strapping and just kind of reconfigure it a little bit so that we can then go through and set these up. These bags right here, the brackets are technically a different bracket. They're not meant to be used with these bags. The bags do fit it, but it's 2 different makers. So gonna have to swap a tab here. And as I was fitting some of these in, I'm realizing that the mount holes for these are in a completely different spot than the mount holes that are on these bags pre-drilled. So that being said, I'm gonna have to fit these up, make some subtle changes to the bags. I think it's easier to alter the bag than it is to actually alter the bracket. I don't really want to have to get into cutting all these tabs off and changing them all out, being that these are like a fiberglass material. It's gonna be a whole lot easier to just pop this center piece out, remove this rubber grommet, and then re-drill where I want to and plug these old holes up and just go that route. So first off, we're gonna get these brackets onto the bike, see exactly what they look like, and then set some bags in there and start mocking up the holes. And I think this will be the last part of this mock-up process. Everything else is going to be body work. So, all right, let's get to it. All right, I don't know if you caught that in the time lapse, but I set this bracket on here, and I don't know. I think it's kicked in just a little at the back. So I knew I was going to have to mess with this. I'm just messing around with the original spacers that came with the nasty looking bags that we yanked off there. Trying to figure out exactly how this thing is going to sit. I think up here is good. It puts it away from the back of the bike enough, and it'll look decent once this is all painted up. The problem is making it look straight to the back of the bike. So if you look at it right here, this back end is still sitting cocked in just a little bit, so it needs a little bit more of a gap there. If, like I said, if you caught it in the time lapse, let me grab this. I had one of the smaller spaces right here doubled up with it, and it actually makes the thing look like it's sitting straight on the bike. The only problem is I don't want it to stick out too far. So I think this is going to be a situation of maybe, you know, during body work or whatever, I try to find some spacers, or worst case, I have to make some spacers that are going to be the exact distance to kind of jack this out just a little bit so that it sits a little bit more straighter. I don't want this thing to go down the road and you see the back of the bags and they're kicked in. I want them to look perfectly in line with the rest of the bike, and that is going to depend on what I choose for a distance right here, because we're good at the front, but at the back here I think it could use probably, maybe, I would say probably about a ½ inch more kicked out at the back would give me exactly what I'm looking for. Unfortunately, I have a drawer full of spacers and different pieces, but nothing that is going to give me exactly what I'm looking for there. So I have to do a little bit of measuring, come up with something. I'm going to replace all this hardware anyway with nice stainless, get the correct size bolts, or length bolts I should say. This is purely just for mock-up. So I think we can kind of put this to bed for right now. Let's start getting these bags put in here, and then try to see what we can do about getting these holes ready to go and getting them drilled. All right, let's do it. Okay, so if we take this bag and we set it in here, which, like I said, the bag is not specifically for this bracket, so we're trying to make do. And you look, we have a tab right here, but our hole is directly behind this bar right here, so that's not going to work. We're going to need a new hole there. The same thing happens at the front. It does line up a little bit different, a little bit closer I should say, but it's still not 100%. And the one that's on the bottom is not even near where it needs to be. My thing is I want to make sure that this bag sits correctly in here, and I'd like to do even gapping all the way around so that it's kind of like the bag just floats in position. If I were to push it right up tight to the side, give myself a huge gap at the front here, I can actually almost make the front of the bag match up. The back is still a country mile off here because here's our hole and here's our other one. But again, I don't really care for the way it sits. So I'm going to try to position this directly in the middle here, and we're going to do a little bit of measuring and make sure it's 100% where it needs to be. And then we are going to mark and then drill some pilot holes for our new mounting holes. And then after, like I said, in the bodywork stages, I will just fill those in. Half of them you don't even really see, like this one is behind this bar. So I'll make it look good, but I don't have to be overly concerned because you're not going to see any of them anyway. The other thing too is you also got to keep in mind too that when you do lift this lid, this one is like glued shut, we want to have enough clearance to clear that fender as well, because when that fender's in here, you know, we don't want the bag coming back and hitting anything. So if we can move this thing out or keep it more towards the center part of this actual bracket, we're not going to run into any issues. So, all right, let me grab a Sharpie, and we're going to start fitting this thing up, see what we can do. Okay, we now have tabs that match the actual holes in the bags, which is a wonderful thing. That one right there is the one I'm going to need to close up on this end. If you go to the front here, we now have a tab that matches up with that hole and another hole to fill in. And then finally, we have this one right here, if you can see it. And then one more hole, which is way far off from the other one that we got to fill in there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the other bag, but I would say that's going to wrap that up, and we're pretty much ready to start tearing this thing back down and sending it off to bodywork and paint. And with that, that's going to bring the mock-up process as well as this video to a close. You join me in the next video when we start on the bodywork and paint. We got a lot of fiberglass work to do. Never my favorite thing, but it's kind of necessary. And we're going to do whatever it's going to take to lay a sick paint job on this thing and turn it into a complete head turner. If you're worried about missing out on when a video comes out, there's an easy way to fix that. Give me the thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. That way you'll know when more videos like this are coming out. And as always, keep the shiny side up, and I'll see you guys all on the next video.